Zikira
Pawagandisia Mana Ndakango mirire Ndakaringenzira Ndakamiriro Kudzoka kwako mwana Ndinongoteerera mira Yendangariro Dziyo yawakaimba Ndakainzwa ini Ndakamirira Rudzoko rwako mwana Rudo rwedu kwauri Harugumi haruperi Saka vimbane Ndakangomirira nandasi.
Don't cry, yes, I'm coming home. Be strong, the days are going by. Be happy.
The pulse of the continent in 60 minutes. Stay informed and inspired with Africa World Hour on Channel Africa.
Good evening and welcome to Africa World Hour. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective broadcasting from Johannesburg in South Africa. Catch us live on the SABC Plus app, on the DSTV audio bouquet channel 802 and an open view channel 628. I am Ntlandla Mahlangu standing in for Tshepiso Makwetla.
The pulse of the continent in 60 minutes. Stay informed and inspired with Africa World Hour on Channel Africa.
Africa World Hour top stories. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has sent his message of condolences to the government and the people of Kenya following the passing of former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. Odinga, who led Kenya from 2008 to 2013, passed away at the age of 80 in India, where he was receiving medical treatment. More from presidential spokesperson Vincent Magwenya.
The nation of Kenya and our continent have lost a patriotic and a selfless leader whom President Ramaphosa knew and worked with as a friend and a brother. Raila Odinga was committed to the development of his own nation, as well as its prosperity and the silencing of the guns on our continent, as evidenced by his appointment by the African Union to advance peace in Cote d'Ivoire in 2010.
The Israeli army has confirmed that one of 4 bodies returned by Hamas to Israel is not a hostage. It's the latest blow in trying to maintain the momentum of the current Gaza ceasefire towards a permanent end to the war. The BBC's Sebastian Asher reports.
The bodies of 7 dead Israeli hostages have now been returned, meaning that at least 20 still remain in Gaza. The Israeli government has accused Hamas of failing to meet its commitments under the ceasefire deal and has essentially threatened that aid won't be permitted into Gaza at the level needed unless this is resolved. But both Hamas and the Red Cross have suggested that it may simply not be possible to track down every one of the bodies in the devastation of Gaza. This is likely also to affect the recovery of the bodies of many Palestinians believed to be buried beneath the rubble.
People in Gaza are reportedly to be stockpiling food as prices surge amid growing concern that the ceasefire may not hold. A trader in the main market of Khan Yunis told the BBC that everyone is afraid that the flow of aid will stop. Israeli officials say the main Rafah crossing won't open to aid today. Israel has warned it will reduce aid if Hamas doesn't hand over the remaining dead hostages. The BBC's Rushdie Abdallah says on the ground there's still extensive deprivation.
There is no running water, and anywhere in Gaza, people have to queue for hours to buy water. You know, prices are getting down a bit, but yesterday when we heard the Israeli threaten to reduce the number of trucks, the prices gone up again for about 25 to 30%. We have seen some sense of normality in some of the markets in Gaza, but still very far from enough.
The chairperson of the Joint Standing Committee on Defence in South Africa, Dr. Malusi Gigaba, says underfunding for the Defence Force is making it difficult to prevent illegal immigration, smuggling and other cross-border crimes. Gigaba is leading a committee in an oversight visit at the borderline between the country and Zimbabwe outside Musina in Limpopo province. Gigaba says that a lack of funds is also making it a challenge to recruit or deploy enough troops to protect the border.
One of the biggest challenges we are facing in this regard is the fact that the SANDF is severely underfunded. As a result, they are not able to recruit new members, to deploy more members. There are supposed to be 22 companies guarding our borders, but there's only 15 at the present moment. Even those face the challenges of lack of personnel, inadequate vehicles, not sufficient technology such as the drones and others.
And finally, South Africa's suspended Deputy National Police Commissioner Shadrack Sibiya claims that there's a smear campaign to prevent him from vying for the vacant position of Hawks boss or the National Police Commissioner when it becomes vacant. He alleges that those involved in the campaign include National Police Commissioner Fani Masemola and KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. Sibiya appeared before Parliament's ad hoc committee looking at concerns of national security.
It is so unfortunate, the situation in which I find myself, that when your colleagues are saying they're pushing you out, and they make life so difficult, and they even paint your name so black out there to the public and everything in such a way that they create an irretrievably broken relationship. Now, I must be the one who end up suffering. And then I also have a family. I also have kids and they are small.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
Indeed, it is Africa World Hour. This is Channel Africa, the African Perspective, broadcasting live from Johannesburg in South Africa. I am Nhlanhla Mahlangu, standing in for Tshepiso Makwetla. Former Kenyan President Raila Odinga, affectionately known as Baba, has died at the age of 80. Reports indicate that he collapsed during a morning walk in Kochi, India, where he was undergoing medical treatment and was pronounced dead after efforts to revive him failed. We now cross to our correspondent in Kenya, Daniel Omide, to paint a picture for us. Daniel, good evening, and thank you so much for taking your time and joining us on Africa World Hour.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Daniel, can you just tell us about the reaction of the people of Kenya to the passing of Mr. Raila Odinga?
Well, news about the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga started trickling in the morning through social media platforms, and eventually some of the major news networks locally broke the news before the formal announcement later on in the afternoon. Following the breaking of the news on local media, Kenyans in many parts of the country went into the streets, wailing, and of course it was received with a lot of shock. There were reports last week that he was unwell, started as rumors as well, reports which sections of his family initially denied before some members of the family confirming that yes, he was indeed unwell and in India. So today it came as a shocker because most of the people in the country were not aware about, or rather were not aware of the severity of whatever was of his condition that he was seeking treatment for in India. And it was met with a lot of sadness. We've seen a lot of condolence messages coming in from ordinary members of the Kenyan public, as well as dignitaries and leaders in various cadres of government, including the former president Uhuru Kenyatta, who sent in a very passionate message of condolence to his family, referring to the loss as a deep personal loss because of the personal friendship that he shared with Raila Odinga over the last 5 years of his tenure as presidency, and also being his preferred candidate as a successor in the last elections. But across the country, in the western part of the country where Raila's stronghold is, political bastion is, if you might call it that, and also which also is where he comes from, the cities of Kisumu, and even in the closer county of Siaya, which is where his home is. The news was met by a lot of shock. People went out in the streets in large numbers, in their hundreds and thousands, just mourning the passing of these great politicians many people refer to as Baba.
And has there been any communication by the government of President Ruto to the announcement of the passing?
Yes, the president had a press conference just a few minutes after 1 p.m. today, where he made an announcement that yes, indeed, he was the prime minister had passed. He was flanked by the former prime minister's elder brother, Mr. Honorable Buru Odinga. Who also serves as a senator in the current Senate. And during that announcement, the president mentioned that that the late Raila Odinga was going to be accorded all the military honors as the funeral is going to unfold. Today in the evening, we've had another announcement or a statement given by the Deputy President, Honorable Kithure Kindiki, His Excellency. And during that briefing that happened just around 7:30 p.m. Central Africa time, he mentioned the plans for the funeral and the burial. This evening, a Kenya Airways flight was dispatched from Nairobi to India to repatriate the body of former Prime Minister Raila Odinga back to the country. The body is expected to arrive here in Nairobi at 7:30 a.m. Central Africa time, 8:30 a.m. local time here in Nairobi. After which it will be escorted to a funeral home here in Nairobi, and then mid-afternoon, 12:30. Early afternoon, 12:30 p.m. here in Nairobi time. That's 11:30 p.m. in your South African time or Central Africa time. His body will be moved from the funeral home to Parliament for viewing that will happen across the day until around 5 p.m. On Friday, the day after tomorrow, there will be a public funeral expected to be attended by dignitaries and heads of state from around the world and including around the continent. And then on Saturday, the body will be flown again to Kisumu. That's in Western Kenya, where his support base is. And there will be another whole day of viewing before his body is moved to his rural home for an overnight stay. And then on Sunday, there will be the final funeral program and burial that will be conducted at his home in Siaya County.
And Daniel, he leaves behind a party. Talk to us about the support he enjoyed there. And do you see the party surviving his sudden death? Or do you not see splits coming as a result of his absence?
Well, the former prime minister has had a very illustrious career in politics. He's led different parties. Previously, he comes from a political dynasty. His father was the first vice president of the Republic of Kenya, and then before moving to become a very formidable opposition politician, just like the former prime minister was for most of his political life. When his father died, there was a sort of a leadership vacuum in the party, which was one of the foremost multi-party or opposition parties in Kenya, the Forum for Restoration of Democracy, popularly known just here in Kenya as Ford Kenya. And there was a split that happened in the parties at that particular point because one faction was led by somebody else, and Raila Odinga wanted to lead the party forward. So during that split, he formed a new party called the Liberal Development Party, LDP, which again later on folded, and he formed the National Democratic Party, and that folded eventually as well after a merger with KANU, and then in 2002, he was part of the coalition that was called the NARC coalition that got KANU out of power where he stayed until 2005 when he parted ways with the former president Mwai Kibaki to form the current party, the Orange Democratic Movement. Now, within the Orange Democratic Movement, he's led the party for what would say like close to 3 decades now at the helm. 2 decades now at the helm of that party. And the party has had a strong following of him. It has always been said that Raila is ODM and ODM is Raila. So he was the party leader. His word in ODM was like law. He was feared by both the politicians who subscribed to the party, but also and he also had a very strong base of supporters and loyalists. He was one of the politicians who was said to sort of like command power that could be comparable to executive power, but outside of the formal executive system. And that just shows you just how popular he was as a politician, how solid his political base was, and the political base for ODM spread beyond the Western Kenya region where Mr. Raila Odinga came from. The coastal region of the country, the far end of the country, was a strong, solid base for him. Nairobi, the capital of the country, was also another solid base for him. So I think, right now, I think that the vacuum that is left is being filled. Of course, there are pockets of conversations around where does the party go from here? What is succession going to look like for the party? But I think it's still too early to tell how that is going to play.
And just before I let you go, Daniel, let's talk about his endorsement to run for the AU Commission chair, of which we all know by now that he failed to get. Did this deter him in any way, in your view?
Well, it didn't deter him. I think he was at a point where he was trying to find a way out of the competitive politics in Kenya and more of move into the direction of becoming an African statesman, a direction that that many other leaders from across the continent have followed, and even those who did not get opportunities to lead their own countries, and because of also his advanced age, that was the direction that he was following. And of course, there were a lot of hopes from the country, and especially his support base, that he was going to clinch that role and then create room in the current political space. And that was specifically important for the current administration because Raila, the politician and the master political strategist that he was, he was like a threat it was like a thorn on the flesh of the government, and he's been to be fair to him to the past administration as well. So the current administration saw it fit that if they supported him to get that position, then it would be easier sailing through the 5 years of this current administration and also possibly another 5-year term for the president. So getting him out of the local competitive politics. That did not, however, wane his support base. I think after failing for that, he had even left the party leadership for other people to hold the positions on an acting role. But he managed to come back and take up his role as the party leader. Play it effectively. Last year, he was very crucial in supporting President Ruto during the Gen Z protests, as the country was revolting, so to speak, against the current administration.
We'll leave it there, Daniel. Thank you so much for taking your time and talking to us on Africa World Hour.
Thank you for having me.
That was our Kenyan correspondent, Daniel Omende, talking to us about the latest in Kenya following the passing of former Prime Minister, Mr. Raila Odinga.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
The surge in global public debt is driven by G20 countries, according to the International Monetary Fund, IMF. Global Public debt levels are expected to rise above 100% by 2029, the highest level since 1948. This while emerging economies on the continent will remain burdened by the high cost of debt, an issue for the African bloc hope to have addressed at the G20 head of state meeting taking place in Johannesburg, South Africa in November. Dimakatso Lishuru has the details.
G20 countries are racking up debt and fast, pointing to deteriorating fiscal risks. These countries collectively account for around 85% of global GDP and represent 75% of global trade, but they are living beyond their means with debt levels fast reaching record highs. Vitor Gaspar, a director at the IMF's Fiscal Affairs Department, says countries need to rein in borrowings and rather spend existing budgets smarter.
In such scenario, public debt would be at its highest level since 1948. Moreover, the distribution of risks is tilted towards debt accumulating even faster. With a 5% risk, debt would reach 124% in 2029. The world public debt landscape is very diverse. Countries differ widely in their deficit and debt levels. Many major economies have public debt greater or projected to go over 100% of GDP.
Leading economies like Canada, China, France, the UK, Italy, and the US, with typically deep and liquid sovereign bond markets, face moderate fiscal risks when compared with emerging economies like those on the African continent.
Many emerging markets and low-income countries face tougher fiscal challenges despite their debt often below 60% of GDP. Their policy options and funding access are limited. As the map shows, 55 countries are assessed at high, pink, or distress level, red, of fiscal risk. In many cases, relatively low debt to GDP ratios are accompanied by low debt tolerance. Beyond the present, fiscal risks loom large. Public debt dynamics have drastically changed in recent years. It's not only the size of debt, but also the cost. From the global financial crisis through to the COVID period.
He points out that this, coupled with stretched financial asset valuations, could lead to a market correction with adverse consequences.
The situation is now starkly different. Interest rate increases have raised funding costs and strained budget. Indeed, interest spending is estimated to increase to 2.9% of GDP in 2025 from 2% in 2020 and is projected to continue to rise to the end of the decade.
On the African continent, the high cost of debt means governments are paying more just to service their debts, leaving less room for the things that boost growth like infrastructure, schools and healthcare. The IMF has made recommendations for economies like Nigeria, saying a neutral fiscal stance was more appropriate. Division Chief for Fiscal Affairs at the IMF, David De Ficciuri, elaborates.
We think that this neutral fiscal stance is also consistent in helping monetary policies to reduce inflation. But let me tell you more about the structural characteristics in terms of our recommendation for countries as Nigeria. And our policies advice has been both on the revenue side as well on the spending side. I think on the revenue side there is a scope to improve revenue. On the spending side there is a scope to, on the one hand, improve the efficiency of the spending, something that as well the compositions, but also to increase social spending to address social vulnerability in the country.
Meanwhile, Egypt also received a nod for improvements in its public finances. However, the debt service costs remain a heavy burden. IMF era Dabla Norris explains.
Egypt achieved a primary surplus of about 2.5% of GDP in fiscal year 2024-2025. So overall debt we see has declined from about 96% to 86% of GDP over the year, and further reductions are expected by the end of the projection horizon. But I should add that the debt service burden in Egypt remains pretty heavy. Interest payments alone absorb about 3/4 of revenue, so that limits the fiscal space that is available.
As South Africa prepares to host the African G20, A total of 165 organizations have criticized the country for failing to make progress on debt sustainability issues during its presidency of the G20. Even though these issues have been standing for years, until now, emerging economies have not been able to have their voices heard on these multilateral platforms. These organizations have urged South Africa to push for reforms before it hands over the G20 presidency to the US on December 1st. For Channel Africa News, I'm Dimakato Leshoro in Johannesburg.
You are listening to Africa World Hour. My name is Nhlanhla Mahlangu, standing in for Tshepiso Makwetla. You can also follow us on our social media platforms on X, Facebook at Channel Africa 1. We're also on the SABC Plus app, on the DSTV audio bouquet, channel 802, and on the OpenView channel 628. We continue to get reaction following the passing of former Kenyan Prime Minister Raila Odinga, who died at the age of 80. He passed away while receiving medical treatment in India. According to reports, he collapsed during a morning walk and was rushed to hospital, where the doctors said he suffered a cardiac arrest. Despite efforts to resuscitate him, he was pronounced dead. In recent weeks, speculation has been mounting about Odinga's health, although family members and those close political allies have publicly dismissed these claims. To discuss this further, we are now joined on the line by his personal friend, Mr. Wafula Buke, who's also the founding member of the Orange Democratic Movement. Mr. Buke, thank you so much for taking your time and joining us on Africa World Hour.
My pleasure and a good privilege. Thank you.
You knew Mr. Raila Odinga not just as a political figure, but as a comrade in the long struggle for democracy. Can you take us back to your earliest memories of him and what first struck you about his character and leadership?
First, allow me to thank the SABC for giving Raila Odinga this attention. He really respected South Africa and valued and got inspired by the struggle for liberation in South Africa. In fact, one of his daughters is called Winnie, after Winnie Mandela. And as he continued operating and fighting for freedom, he also got a nickname of being Kenya's Nelson Mandela. So that you have time for him, I want to thank you for that. Now, coming to Raila's time, Raila, I would say ideologically, he emerges from the failings of independence. He picks the thread that seeks to advance liberation beyond just personalities, but substance and organization of our society. Actually, I would call him a socialist-leaning person at that time. And he starts featuring in the national politics of Kenya after the failed coup of 1982. Well, he himself says he may not have been involved, but what you gather from his political life is that he believed in change and believed in working for it and was a disciplined person in the struggle for change. The most important thing that has given him a lot of respect among us is his determination and his willingness to sacrifice. Actually, working for him, you feared for him to a point where you also started fearing for yourself, because he operated as though he was already through his death and was ready to die at a time. You know, one of the surprises of our times is that he has actually managed to live his entire political life without getting an assassin's bullet, because he was a qualified candidate for assassination throughout his life and survived many things. So I would say he was a disciplined soldier, a disciplined freedom fighter, and very economical with his time. In fact, when he left prison, if you talk to Raila and it didn't make sense, he disconnected with you immediately. He turned and went elsewhere. Similarly, on resources, some even think he was mean. But the truth is that every resource he got had produced results. And if you convinced him that a cause was right, he funded it on the spot. So I would say this is a patriot who decided that his life and his ideas and his resources would be deployed towards achieving change for us in Kenya.
And having worked with him through some of Kenya's most turbulent political chapters, what personal values or habits defined him behind the scenes, away from the rallies and the cameras?
See, I must say that first he valued people, and the special characteristic of his behavior is that his socialization cut across classes, and he was really a serious builder of networks and structures. You know, Raila had a soldier almost in every space that was important. You know, Matatu touts, he had in most of the places somebody would always talk to. He would deal with a big leader, but after dealing with a big leader, he talks to the most ordinary person who's down there. So I want to say that behind the scenes, his socialization really had a lot of focus on the classes that were downtrodden, as opposed to confining himself to the so-called people who matter within the bourgeois setup.
And many remember Raila as both a father figure and a mentor in activism. How did he shape your own political consciousness and approach to resistance?
You see, we have an age difference of about almost 20 years. But for me, when I was involved in student leadership, I was the chairman of the students' organization. The persons who inspired my generation was Raila Odinga. At that point, he was in prison, serving a prison term. He was jailed in his early 40s. But he was still, we looked to him. Because of the hatred and fear that the system had for him, we got inspired by him. And actually, we took him as our icon, in addition to his father who was also around and providing leadership. So his impact on us is first inspiration. Then when he comes and starts working with us, we listen to his philosophies. At the time, he was, I would call him a social democrat, leaning almost towards socialism. So now that also became a philosophy which most of our generation embraced and used as a basis for political engagement within our struggles in Kenya. So ideologically, it was very important. Then the other bit was organization. I don't think this country will ever get anybody who could mobilize the way our brother and comrade Raila Odinga used to mobilize. Raila could mobilize. He mobilized, spent a lot of time and commitment to make sure that people do what he wanted. And that's why I would say that in Kenya, we should have a respectable position on matters dealing with mass action and mass engagement with the state. This is all a legacy that emerges from the leadership of our brother Raila Odinga late.
And if you had to describe him in one word, one that captures both his triumphs and trials, what would that word be and why?
I think the best word I see is the word forward. Nothing could stop Raila from getting what he wants. He never respected any obstacle. And if any obstacle became too tough, he found a way around it and managed to get a chance to overcome that particular obstacle. You see, you look at the many times. First of all, he stood for elections for about 5 times. And we as Kenyans know, including what the Kirigla of South Africa, the judge, said about the Kenyan experiences. He has been winning these elections. But he doesn't give up. And when he realizes that it is no longer possible for him to pursue power, he finds another backdoor way of controlling the same government. As he's going to his grave right now, he's been the most powerful person, in fact, more powerful than the president himself. So Raila has been able to influence and control the levers of power, despite being in government. Reason being, he believes in moving forward and not giving up. So I would say the right word that can capture Raila's commitment and political journey is the word forward.
And what do you consider the most, his enduring contribution to Kenya's democratic evolution?
First, I think we have. Anybody would quickly say that his greatest contribution is the constitution we had. He was quite key in the formation of that constitution, and that was, actually, I would say, it's his legacy. But I think the most important thing that Raila did for the Kenyan people is give us a spirit to struggle. Our Kenyan people are a determined lot. Evil cannot stop them from fighting. And that's Raila's contribution. I want to think that the greatest contribution he gave us is plant a seed of resistance against evil.
And just before I let you go, how should Kenya honor Mr. Raila Odinga in your view? Mr. Pickett? We might have lost him there. That was a fellow personal friend of Mr. Raila Odinga, Mr. Wafula Buke, who's also the founding member of the Orange Democratic Movement. He was just talking to us, paying tribute to Mr. Raila Odinga, who passed away at the age of 80.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
You're listening to Africa World Hour. My name is Nhlanhla Mahlangu, standing in for Tshepiso Makwetla. Remember, we come to you every Monday to Friday from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock Central African Time. A decade ago, the West Nation launched a unique and ambitious trade monitoring system. It tracked intra-regional trade in agricultural products and livestock, covering more than 320 markets and a long 10 trade corridors from Guinea and Senegal in the west through to Nigeria in the east. However, since 2022, the system has affectionately collapsed due to the lack of funding, amongst other challenges. Now, to talk more about these developments, we are joined by Dr. Alban Masaparisi, an economist specializing in food systems, transformation and agricultural policy at the OECD Sahel and West Africa Club. Dr. Alban, thank you so much for taking your time and talking to us on Africa World Hour.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Can you explain the structure and purpose of West Africa's trade monitoring system and what specific mechanisms have failed or ceased to function?
Yes, sure. So this is a trade monitoring mechanism that is quite specific to West Africa. It was set up in 2012. Through the Economic Commission of West African States, ECOWAS, and CILS, the Permanent Interstate Committee for Drought Control in the Sahel, which is the main regional research institute on food and agriculture in West Africa. And this system the aim for the system has been to track regional food trade in West Africa that is mostly unrecorded by the customs and therefore unaccounted for in policy, investments, food security, and nutrition planning. So really that was the idea back in the day. And this system's been supported by a number of donors and technical partners throughout the years, USAID, IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, the International Food Policy Research Institute. So it's been going on and on for more than a decade, led by CILS, and then from 2020, CILS has worked with the West African Association of Cross-Border Trade, which is a private sector association of intra-regional food traders, basically in West Africa, that covers a lot of chambers of commerce across the region, to really collect data on, as you mentioned, hundreds of markets in the region, about every country in the region except for Cabo Verde, and through this system, they really accumulated very, very valuable data on the volume, the value, the origin, and the destination of food products that were going through the region. So that was really that's been the system. And in terms of purpose, well, as I mentioned, the food occupies a massive share of the economy of West Africa. So the fact that it's been mostly, this regional trade of food has been mostly not captured, has been a huge issue for macroeconomic reasons. So governments, states in the region have not been able to really understand the balance of payments, for instance, or the GDP. For food security and nutrition, governments have not really been able to understand with accuracy what food goes in and out of the country. So this data really helps with that. Also for market promotion, governments wishing to support their food exports in the region really don't really have a good understanding of what are the size of the food trade region, of the regional food trade. So equally, the private sector doesn't really have accurate data on that. So really, this data has been helping, or is really valuable for that purpose. And I think one of the last purpose of this system has been to really document the size, the underestimated size of that trade, and kind of shift perceptions on the fact that a lot of people in the region, policymakers, civil society, private sector have this vision that it's low value. But in reality, and this is where kind of I come in as an economist from the OECD Sahel and West Africa Club, we've worked with this data, with SILS, with WACTAF, the West Africa Cross-Border Traders Association, to analyze the data and show that, in fact, that trade is in West Africa, at least international food trade is a $10 billion US sector. So it's about 6 times more than you would see from the official statistics. As much as 85% of it goes unrecorded. And really, when you have the data, you get a better sense of the value of that trade for economic development, food security, and all these aspects that I mentioned.
And what were the early warning signs that the regional trade monitoring system was weakening, and were there missed opportunities for intervention in your view?
I think the system's been under strain for a number of years. Obviously, recently, as we are all well aware, there's been massive cuts in donor funding overall in 2025. Aid's been cut by $30 billion globally. USAID, which, as I said, has been funding the system initially, the budget has been cut by almost a half. And even before this happened, really that system's been supported a lot by donor resources, and governments had limited resources to support national statistical systems for capturing regional food trade. And so when the donors are withdrawing the money, then national resources have not been really matching this withdrawal. And one reason for that is that really this regional trade monitoring has not been traditionally considered a priority by governments themselves. Regional organizations like ECOWAS, SILS, for sure, they're the ones who initiated this system. They had a good and still have a good understanding of its importance. But at national level, sometimes it's been really undervalued, the importance of tracking this trade. And this is a bit of a vicious circle because as this trade is not being really counted properly or monitored, then it doesn't appear as important as it is in national statistical systems. And therefore, also governments kind of don't really invest in measuring it. So I think, there is now a shift that is needed to from this funding that's been quite donor dependent to funding from of course, donor community is still there, but also there is scope for investing more national budgets and regional resources to kind of revive the system.
And how does the collapse of this system directly threaten fruit supply chains across the region, particularly for landlocked or import-dependent countries?
Yes, that's an important question. If you look at West Africa, you have landlocked countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and they export a lot of livestock, for instance, to the rest of the region, especially coastal countries. And we analyzed, so as OECD Sahel West Africa Club, we analyzed this data that had been collected by SILS, WACTAF, and what we realized is, if you, for instance, if you look at the livestock exports, the official exports from these 3 landlocked countries, you will see that they export about $80 million per year. But in reality, when you assess the reality of this unrecorded trade using this data and some assumptions that we made as well, you understand that this trade is probably closer to $1 billion. So it's about more than 10 times higher than what the statistics would report in that case. So then the question is, for instance, for these landlocked countries, for these kind of regional food supply chains, there is really an issue of how governments, private sectors can attract investment, can have the right level of policy support to the right sectors without the right data. Another example, and that's tied to this question, is right now there's a lot of discussion across Africa on investing in food corridors. So, for instance, in West Africa, there's about $15 billion planned for the Lagos-Abidjan corridor because it's perceived as a really valuable corridor to support. But there's really, as I just said, there's billions of dollars of food moving also from across the Sahelian band, and there's much less investment planned there. And also that's an issue of not having the right data to advocate for these investments. So I think that's one thing. And finally, another example, if you look at Burkina Faso, for instance, the government is trying to really kickstart the tomato or invest in the national tomato industry. One of the main partners, or if not the main partner of Burkina, is Ghana, neighbor country. And if you look at the unrecorded trade data for tomato exports from Burkina, you will see that the Ghanaian market is actually 58 times, or the exports from Burkina to Ghana are about 58 times higher than what you would find in official statistics. So the size of the market is massive, but really as a government or as a company in countries in the region, you really have a hard time understanding where your markets are, where your priority sectors, food sectors are. So I would say that, yes.
And just lastly, before I let you go, how are ECOWAS and the national governments responding? Is there coordinated efforts to rebuild or replace the system?
I think there's definitely momentum to invest in recording intra-regional food trade, or better tracking it with the AFCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, the Kampala Declaration on Agri-Food Systems that government signed, all governments in the region signed, and that aims to triple intra-regional food trade by 2035. So there is this policy and political momentum for intra-regional food trade, and also the kind of the food sovereignty agenda, whereby a lot of nations in Africa and West Africa really want to be more kind of wean off dependency from imports from the rest of the world. So the momentum is there. The question is really for ECOWAS, for national governments and partners such as the OECD Sahel and West Africa Club, to work together to really set up the right conditions for better tracking, measuring of this intra-regional food trade, to really provide the proper data and evidence to support regional food trade in the region. Thank you.
Dr. Masaparisi, we'll leave it there. I really appreciate you taking your time and talking to us on Africa World Hour.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Thanks.
That was Dr. Alban Masaparisi, an economist specializing in food system transformation and agricultural policy at the OECD Sahel and West African Club.
Siyabangena manje. Vito Jabulani Nkolele iMagoda. Jabulani is a young man from Giyani in Limpopo in South Africa. Very easy guy, taking things easy. To know me is to know that I love what I do, which I'm crazy about it. So when you hear me on radio, expect the best. Expect great music. Expect great content. Expect 180 minutes of nothing but fun. You'll find me on the morning reset, 3 to 6 a.m., Monday to Friday. Siyabangena baba. Ay. Mbuleke.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
It is indeed Africa World Hour, broadcasting from Channel Africa, the African Perspective. We are live from Johannesburg, South Africa. You can catch us live on the SABC Plus app, on the audio bouquet channel 802, as well as on OpenView channel 628. I am Nhlanhla Mahlangu, standing in for Tshepiso Makwetla. Today, the 15th of October, marks the International Day of Rural Women, a United Nations observance that highlights the vital contribution of women in rural areas to food production, community resilience, and sustainable development worldwide. Across Africa, women remain at the heart of agriculture, yet they often face barriers to land, finance, and training. In South Africa's Free State province, one young entrepreneur is working to change that. Itumeleng Mahoang, a founder of Tabomeleng Training Institute, is helping rural and township women turn small plots of land into viable agri-business. Mahoang joins us to now discuss this further. Itumeleng, thank you so much for taking your time and joining us on Africa World Hour.
Thank you very much, Nhlanhla, for having me this evening.
Today is International Day of Rural Women. From your experience working with women farmers in the Free State, what does this day mean to you, and why? And what's the significance for Africa's rural communities?
This is a very imperative day to women in the agricultural space, especially in the Free State, because not often at times women are never spotlighted, more especially in a sector as viable as agriculture. Not only that, purely because the male-dominated area of agriculture, it's never easily penetrated by women, more especially the women in the remote areas where we hardly reach. So this day marks a significant one ever, because we get to focus a lot on what's happening in the small-scale farmers in the rural Free State.
Now, your institute focuses not only on farming but also on agri-processing, which many see as a key to unlocking greater value in agriculture. Can you just explain what agri-processing involves and why you believe it's an important opportunity for women?
Thank you very much. Agro-processing is a form of converting any form of agricultural raw material into a product that can be utilized by anybody in any household. I'll give you a practical maybe example or two. With salts, you can be able to add essential oils, whether it's lavender, whether it's eucalyptus, to form a bath salts, to also form scrubs. This is basically agro-processing, because you took a raw material and turned it into a household product. The other one that I normally like highlighting or spotlighting on is the juices that are being able to be produced from either spinach from the backyards, or utilizing celery or any form of agricultural plant to be able to utilize as either a shot, a healthy shot, or just a normal juice, just like anybody drinks it.
Mm. And you've trained, a number of women who started from backyard gardens and turned them into successful business owners. What are some of the most inspiring success stories that have come out of your training programs?
My goodness, where do I even start? I'll mention 3 top ones that stands out for me. So it's 20 women that I was training in 2024 from August, 4 months from August last year. So what happened was this was an Agri-SETA funded initiative where I had to apply for the grant, and then I brought them back to the Free State, where I had to train the women that are already in the programs. So one of the women, immediately when we finished with the program, and then we're holding a certification ceremony or a graduation, and then it was fully fledged graduation regalia on them, and then stakeholders were there. It was a beautiful event, I don't want to lie. And she came to me and said, you know what, Itumeleng, because of this program, I now believe that I can be able to start and finish something. And I never had a matric certificate, so I'm going back to enroll for it. And I can confirm that she actually went back to school to complete her matric because of the impact that we did with training as well as the ceremony afterwards. And the second one would be where we enrolled in the same group again, and quite an old woman. She's 62. She was 62 then, so she's about 63 now. And remember, when you have a funded initiative, the funder will give you the guidelines that I want you to target young people in this agricultural space. And I literally took a leap of faith and I took a risk, put my head down and said that because this woman shows so much interest in this and she's already doing a lot at her backyard farming, I enrolled her in. Not only did she get 100% attendance, she was eager to learn, given that she had some impairments in terms of writing and reading, but we had extra support to make sure that she can be able to be successful afterwards. And she also graduated. Furthermore, she was granted a grant from the Free State Agricultural Department for infrastructure in agriculture to the value of R500,000.
Those are such inspiring stories. You've also received several awards for your work in empowerment and education. But what keeps you motivated, and what are your hopes for expanding your impact across South Africa and the rest of the continent?
What keeps me motivated, it's basically the support that I'm currently having. Business can be very, very lonely. It does not matter which industry you could be in. I was very, very fortunate to have been part of the Sibanye Stillwater mentoring program, which is youth in mining program. This is where I was assigned mentors, both business mentor and personal mentor, where they were able to make sure that I balance all the hierarchy of needs and be able to run a business with everything balanced on my personal level. So the same techniques that they've utilized on me and that made sure that I succeed in this, I'm applying them. So it's basically a ripple effect on all the mentees and all the training candidates that we have in our trainings, because I offer close mentoring to them. And I also help with access to market. If there's any form of opportunities that are appearing in the similar industry, with them. I'll give you a practical example. We actually in the planning now, where I'm currently linking them with a commercial farmer who owns basically the full value chain. She owns hectares of land, then she has an abattoir in the same land, and then the butchery. So you can just realize that she's literally covering the entire thing. And these were one of the goals that few of the women in the program wanted to pursue, which is having an abattoir and a butchery. So we're going to be visiting her and learning a lot from her. And then in this instance, or in this case, I think it will be impactful, and then they can be able to practice the similar or maybe an exemplar to their farms back at home.
And what's next for Thabo Meleng Training Institute? What are the plans to expand beyond just the Free State and to scale up, your impact nationally?
We've actually started. One of my goals previously was to basically reach the unreachable places, which is the townships, because now our UPS, or our unique selling point in business, is that we take training to the people. I wouldn't want distance to be the barrier of access or the barrier for entry for young people that wants to enroll into our programs. So we currently are traceable in Gauteng. We're doing small satellite or piloting projects just to check the appetite of the people on the ground. And once we are fully confident that we are known on the ground, that's when we can be able to expand fully. Because right now, our base is in the Free State, but we've got a few sites in and around it, one in Mamelodi, and then there's Katlehong as well as Kagiso, where there's currently trainings in a very small scale that are currently taking place. And so far, I can confidently say the response has been quite impressive. It's not easy as a private institutions of higher learning to easily and trust, because most of the private sector colleges are normally fly by night. So it's not easy to get that trust But with our accreditations and with the good track record that we have, and also the awards that we have won in the previous years are quite credible, and people tend to be more relaxed and confident in our delivery.
Itumeleng, we'll leave it there. I really do appreciate you taking your time and talking to us on Africa World Hour. May your star keep shining, and may you continue to be that beacon of hope for all women, not just in the Free State, but across South Africa and the rest of the continent. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Nhlanhla.
That was Itumeleng Mahong, founder of the Thabo Meleng Training Institute, who's doing amazing work in the Free State. We heard how, she's helped women from studying backyard gardens to being successful business owners, and how she's mentoring young girls and upscaling them and giving them opportunities as the world today marks International Day for Rural Women, a United Nations observance that highlights the vital contribution of women in rural areas to food production, community resilience, and sustainable development worldwide. And that's how we wrap up today's show. My name is Nhlanhla Mahlangu. It was such a pleasure standing in for Tshepiso Makwetla. Thank you to producer Tumelo Zulu, technical producer Catherine Chuchu, and the rest of the Africa World Hour team. Thank you for listening. Remember, you can always send us comment on the show, and you can email it to info@channelafrica.org. It's good night from myself and the team.